I'm Ian King. I'm a technology reporter for Bloomberg here in San Francisco. I cover hardware, networking, and semiconductors. We all love semiconductors, obviously. I'm joined by, I think, a really good panel who've got some really good insights. I've already learned a ton from them. Immediately to my left, we have Sherry Ryan, who's the Chief Information and Security Officer for Juniper Networks, obviously one of the biggest network equipment companies in the world. We've got Vijay Sankaran, who's the Chief Information Officer at TD Ameritrade. We probably all have our pension funds somehow working with Vijay, right? And then last but not least, down the end, we've got Anthony Lai, who's the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Cloud Data Services at NetApp. If you don't know what NetApp is, you really shouldn't be here at this point. They're our sponsors, put it that way, so thank you very much. We're going to start by, I think, throwing down a challenge. A lot of the companies I speak to can't get over themselves by saying, look, data, it's a given, right? Data is only, they're exponentially increasing. On the flip side of that, the amount of data that we're actually gaining value from, that we're using to improve business outcomes, that we're using to cure cancer, to accurately predict the weather, whatever it should be doing, is absolutely minimal. It's the thinnest of thin slices of what's available to us. If we agree with that premise, then we need to find out, well, give us examples of something that has worked, give us an example of something that's changed because I've been able to harness new data, new features of the cloud, of my own data center that are open to me. So I'm going to challenge each of our panelists to give us an example to start off with of some element of their work life or something that's changed because they've been able to make a breakthrough. Would you like to start, Sherry?
Sure. So I am the Chief Information Security Officer, so cybersecurity is really my life, and I'm focused on protecting Juniper and that data that we have that belongs to us and our customers, and intellectual property as well. So one of the best cases I have is a solution called MistNet that started in our CTO's office a few years ago and now is outside as a company, MistNet, not the wireless Mist company that we bought recently, but this one takes data from all the devices on my network, using them as the sensors, basically, to take data about what's happening on the network, which then gives me a picture of behaviors, and I can really very fine-tune what's happening and find that stuff that I need to be concerned about. And it's, of course, using those overused buzz terms, AI and ML as well, right? But very, very useful for me in understanding good behavior on the network and identifying the bad.
Great. So a couple of years ago, our CEO, who had started at the time, Tim Hockey, he really had this notion that he wanted to push down decision-making to all of the individual line managers and associates across the firm. So he kicked off this initiative called Management Reporting, which is really how do we get all of our firm-wide KPIs on a dashboard down to different levels across the firm, everything from firm-wide profitability, daily metrics, agility, speed, across all of the different lines of business. So we actually started embarking on this journey a couple of years ago, and it's really begun to pay a lot of fruit across the organization, so that now we have a standardized set of KPIs from the executive level down to each of the individual line of business levels, and now we're actually democratizing that to lower and lower levels of the organization, so that on a day-to-day basis, whether it's a branch manager or whether it's somebody in our call centers or somebody in our operations functions, they can come in and really look at their dashboard and say, how are my key KPIs for my particular business function? And it really required, that level of executive sponsorship to first define what all of these terms mean. So in our company, you would think for trading, we have things what's called a DART, which is a revenue trade. It would be fairly simple, but you would find it funny the debates that ensued around just simple terms like our daily average revenue trade. What is it? What is counted? What is not counted? So it required a lot of firm-wide cultural change management to get the definitions aligned for all of these KPIs, and then figure out the lineage around the data, where should it be populated from, how does it get calculated, how does it become part of a scoreboard. So there's a huge process in terms of actually what I would say is curating and cultivating the data in terms of doing an enterprise-wide dashboard. But it's been really powerful, and it's something that now has set us up for additional data initiatives that are at the enterprise level.
Yeah, NetApp, many years ago, NetApp started a function called auto support. And the idea was that all of these devices were out in customer sites, and when customers would call NetApp with a question or a support ticket, the support agent would ask them 10 questions. What version are you running? What's the configuration? All these kinds of questions. Auto support would pre-populate the ticket. But a couple of years ago, we decided to pool everybody's data into one very large data lake. And what we found is through data and through artificial intelligence that actually we can spot and identify how certain customers run certain workloads. And we can guide other customers across that normal distribution, customers that have made mistakes, customers that haven't switched certain things on or haven't taken advantage of a new release. We're able to sort of pool and compare and contrast, almost 500,000 controllers that give us billions of data points every single day. And so we're constantly sort of looking at what the best people have done and then moving that data back into the larger part of the market and getting the larger part of the market to sort of observe and progress based on best practices that were once only available to the smaller minority population. So we get this ever-improving sort of performance benefit that the system passes on to customers.
How difficult was that to implement?
Well, I think like anything, it's a lot of data.
Right.
And so to the points that were made earlier, the hardest thing is what question do you want to ask? What we tended to find just by looking at clustering, we tended to find that there were similar configurations. And when we looked at the performance of a particular workload, like a database or an ERP application, we started to see that certain things were clustering, that people were doing the same kinds of things. And if people weren't in that particular cluster, they had very different characteristics and challenges that if we could put them into that cluster, they would have. So we use some fairly, I would say, standard technologies at first, and now we've become more familiar with the data set. We use more and more progressive techniques to surface more and more insights.
Right. This panel we're here to talk about the cloud, whether it's the multi-cloud, whether it's the hybrid cloud. There's all manner of different terms, but really what we're talking about is a decision that you make as to how you run your company fundamentally. And I believe, Juniper, a few years ago you made a very strong commitment to go in one direction, which I believe you finished last year, and that is to totally move to the cloud, no more
That's correct.
data. Why did you do that, and how difficult was it?
It's speed, it's cost, it's simplicity. It's, believe it or not, less complex than having 18, on-prem data centers, legacy data centers that you don't remember really what's been in there over the years and how they've gotten to the state they're in. So we had a CIO who came and said, why not cloud? That's our strategy. And we moved so that everything, all business applications, are running out of public clouds.
Public cloud.
We do have 2 data centers left that are on-prem. They were purpose-built to house the private clouds that support product development. But everything else is in a public cloud, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, things move pretty quickly, and you find that your legacy security tools don't work in some of the clouds. Many of them won't. You have to find new capabilities, and then you learn that you have new concerns in the cloud that perhaps you didn't have, right? When you were using an on-prem data center. So it's been a wild ride, but it's one that has been very successful for us. And we're absolutely glad that we did it, and we learned a lot about clouds and supporting multiple clouds and what kinds of solutions are needed in clouds on that journey.
Any mistakes that got made that you learned from? Anything you would have done differently?
No, honestly, I can't think of that. Right. We made some decisions on tools, and then tools got bought by competitors, and so we had to find new tools. But no, I think that we're happy with it, and it's been a success.
And I was saying that I was telling her earlier on that I kind of have a contrarian's view to the cloud, right? And so you call me maybe a traditionalist, right? But we've just thought of the cloud as a tool in the toolbox at the end of the day, and as the CIO of a regulated financial services company, we're looking at a lot of different aspects, and some of the challenges, in terms of just taking everything out to the cloud that we had is, first of all, what our clients do is they invest every single day, and some of them are trading, in terms of options and derivatives and things like that. So number one, we want to preserve that client experience. And I think some of the things that we've seen is once you get into a multi-cloud environment or you have dependencies around public cloud-based tools, to measure that effectiveness, to preserve that client experience, sometimes is a really challenging thing to do. So we've actually decided that we're not going to go put our core trading path on the cloud, public cloud at this point in time. So we've invested heavily in a private cloud model.
Could you have done that though? Is it technologically wise feasible? Latency and everything else, could that have been done if you'd have decided to do it?
It is technologically feasible, but as we also looked at the cost versus value trade-off, right? And to get that experience, I think, we have a lot of experts who have worked down to, the hardware level in terms of looking at things like market data and real-time streaming and things like that, a lot of which aren't readily available on the cloud. So in some ways, if we decided to go to the cloud, we'd probably be working with a provider to create those optimized kind of environments. So we didn't go down that path with the cloud. Now, other stuff like, utility applications, like, your HR and finance applications and corporate collaboration type applications, the cloud is definitely the right way to go because, frankly, there's no innovation happening in the the vendor stack right now. So there's no real opportunity to do anything but the cloud. But we think of it as a tool in the toolbox, and where there's a strategic experience that we want to preserve, right. We tend to really leverage our data center. But we also gave our technology team the mandate to be like the public cloud, so that you mentioned you can go in with a credit card and pull up a sandbox environment so you can innovate. We've created that internally as well, and where we can't give those capabilities, we allow our teams to go on the public cloud, but we guide them through that process.
I mean, with regards to the public cloud, Anthony, I know you. In theory, this is great. We've got competition. We've got AWS. We've got Azure. We've got all of these vendors keen to fight on price so that they can do everything for us. But you're saying the reality, particularly as it pertains to data, doesn't reflect that. Right?
Yeah, I think everyone's sort of utopian kind of belief was they could wake up on a morning and make a decision based on who had the cheapest compute or who had the latest access to GPUs, and it's just not the reality. There's this thing called data that has mass, and moving it is a non-trivial thing. And most people, don't realize that the internet only is so big, and Amazon has proven that, FedEx can move data faster than the internet. So that there is always going to be that challenge about, what is really the single biggest asset that you own as a company, and I think we're increasingly of the opinion that that's the data. And, the first rule of data management is not to copy the data. So, if you are going to sort of consider a multi-cloud strategy, whether it's public or private or some combination, what we tend to find is a lot of the companies have thought about their SaaS strategy, their PaaS strategy, and even their IaaS strategy, but not their data management strategy. And that's something now I think a lot of people are realizing, that the public clouds have opened up all this innovation, and they've enabled more and more people to purchase technology, but to do so without any construct of sort of discipline around data could be potentially catastrophic to many, many organizations. Security, incorrect decision-making. There's so many risks that companies create if they allow the data itself to be just randomly moved and copied.
Yeah. I'm also really worried about, the data landfills that could be created if not managed properly, right? I mean, that's actually like a little bit of a nightmare for me, is that, you open it all up, say, put all your data on the cloud, people leave your firms, and then nobody remembers what the user IDs and logins were, which cloud that you left it on, right? So you have to be very, very purposeful, I think, as you sort
it's
of.
It's like, Google Docs, Google Sheets, they're fantastic tools. But, I think not many people understand they've just moved data from inside their organization somewhere else. And I'm not sure they're aware of where somewhere else might be.
Right.
And they're certainly not aware, probably, of what the sorts of regulatory considerations are on the data they're moving around.
And that's, you have to know where your data is, right?
You do, and it's amazing to me how many companies don't know where their data is, or, even what data they have. And so that struggle that, IT departments have had traditionally of just knowing all the assets that they had on their network, is now compounded, much, much greater because of the data. And I agree, that's where the real value is. And when I focus on enabling value creation with security solutions, I'm really focused on the data that matters most and protecting it.
As a CISO, does it keep you awake at night in a multi-cloud, multi-data environment?
No, it doesn't, because I really do believe that going into the cloud was refreshing as going into a new greenfield data center, right? I didn't have that legacy stuff there. I knew what I was getting into. Now, you lock yourselves into a cloud, right, if you use and rely on the proprietary tools. And you're correct. The tools weren't all there early on. But every month, we have new tools that work in multiple clouds, and including ones coming from, us as well. So now I find that I have the solutions I need to be able to manage securely in those environments and not get locked in.
Yeah, I'm still surprised that we're not being told to capitalize data, to actually put data on the balance sheet. Some companies have done that. The airline industry, I think Qantas valued its loyalty program more than the airline. So some companies are realizing that data is both an asset and a liability. And if it is the single biggest thing that every company owns, I truly believe that there are financial implications that have to be considered with data sets, because there are liabilities that we've seen through breaches, through GDPR problems, and all sorts of things that companies are now, more concerned about than many other things.
We're going to segue on to security in a second, but first we've got another poll. Are you excited for this? Ready? So I'm going to just read you this one. What areas of edge computing are most vulnerable to hackers? Okay. Is it industrial machines, things like wind turbines, MRIs, scanners, all kinds, you know the rest? Is it industrial controllers, things like SCADA systems? Does everybody know what a SCADA system is? Okay, looking away slightly here, nobody wants to tell me what one is, all right? It's a supervisory controlled data acquisition system. Or is it time series databases, that basically where all of the data is aggregated from equipment and sensors? And if I can actually...
I'm surprised you don't put Facebook up there as... It probably gets hacked more than anything else, but just ethically, I think.
So it looks like we're settling down, and it looks like we are most worried about
the controls.
Industrial controls, right?
Yeah.
Pretty even.
Okay. Pretty even, but we got that. Oh, last minute dash by time series databases. If we could just carry on with security, to segue on from what we were talking about, for a financial services company, security is not negotiable.
That's right.
If you're making switches and routers, no backdoors, right? I mean, these are the givens, right? These are the things we have to think about. But as we progress into this multi-cloud world, the equipment changes. You don't know what equipment you're using. There's virtualized work. There's all manner of different access points, different points where the security should be implemented. And ideally, you want a systematic approach. I'm wondering, back to Vijay's question, does that not keep you up at night?
No, it doesn't, because we've been able to work out, a thoughtful architecture that we put in place for the multi-clouds, and we did not depend upon all the proprietary tools. We also put in tools that help us to understand. There were a whole slew of data disclosures in the last year from S3 buckets being left open on the internet, right? And we put tools in place that help us to monitor that we haven't made any configuration changes. I mean, those are human error. People didn't do it on purpose, and that really human error contributes to a lot of security breaches. So we have those things in place so we can monitor the state of our security across the multi-clouds. Now, the other area of risk is back to the point about getting to that data. If you don't move the data, you've got to get to it. And so interfaces are a huge concern to me, and the insecurity that might come with those, with APIs. And so we've been focusing on those as well. I mean, it's not just that people expect us to build secure network products, but we're a security company. So the bar and the expectation for us is higher for that reason.
I mean, Anthony, you talked about one of NetApp's qualities as being this ability to make this migration, this flexibility, fungibility, if you like, easier. But isn't, by its definition, making ease of use, opening more avenues
for sure.
of attack?
I mean, I think we're at a point where, if you think about life before the cloud, that the largest global organizations controlled IT. And they thought about IT in broad horizontal layers. They thought about networking, and they thought about storage, and they thought about compute. And security was just another horizontal layer. What we see happening now is the businesses, through this democratization and openness of public clouds and this desire to be digital, more and more people have started to consume infrastructure on the public clouds. So we've seen a pivot from the horizontal to the workload. And now the application developer feels that they have decision-making authority all the way from the application all the way down the stack. And so I think it's beholden on the vendors themselves to embed security within their core products. I don't feel that it's possible for a single independent security company to govern the entire ecosystem of on-premise, public cloud, and private cloud. Each vendor's going to have to do that, I think, as part of their corporate responsibility to their customers, and to do it not just for the IT people, but to do it for the application developers and the data scientists.
I mean, Vijay, what about you, though? I mean, is part of the reason that you decided to stay in-house, you obviously have financial information, which is arguably some of the most sensitive out there. Was that one of the reasons you decided to stay in-house, so you can build that moat around it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for all of us, there's this balance between innovation and risk, right? And risk management, whether it's on-prem or whether it's in the cloud, right? And you always have to assume that at some point, there's going to be an incident, that somebody's going to compromise credentials or get into something, right? And so then you have to think about, okay, how do you make the exposure of that as minimal as possible, right? And so then you sort of design actually backwards in terms of that. So you say, okay, I'm not going to put, what kind of data am I putting out on the cloud? How is that data masked, right? How do I have visibility into the data that's transferred from on-prem into the cloud, right? Who has access to those assets? Where are the keys held to, encrypt or decrypt that data, right? So it's almost like designing from the fact that you have to mitigate the risk in your enterprise and not put so many controls around it so that you're choking the enterprise to not allow it to innovate at the same time, right? So it's a pretty tough job, and I think our decision to not do as much on the cloud has been less about security risk as it's been more just about the value of the cloud in and of itself for our business. Now, that can be totally different for other businesses. There are certainly areas in our business like some of the more innovative capabilities around AI and ML where we are actually doing more with the cloud. But even in large enterprise systems like HR or financial systems, I mean, that's pretty sensitive data. So we have to go through a process where we have to really spend time with those vendors, understanding what their cloud security strategy is, how they are actually protecting the data there. But again, it goes back to what Anthony said. Again, it's all about the data at the end of the day on the cloud, right? Because that is the biggest exposure to any company at the end of the day is the data.
And all three of you in your what you've said have touched upon the concepts of AI, of ML, and again, these are wonderful buzzwords like multi-cloud that people love to throw around. Yet when I talk to my companies, and if you look at the majority of computing, of MIPS, that is quote-unquote AI related, it's basically automated picture, image recognition, and natural language processing. That is by far the vast majority of the work that's being done under the AI heading. And I think we'd all agree that it's lovely. We all want to be able to find cat videos as quickly as we possibly can, but not really changing the nature of human existence, not really keeping us safe, and not really improving the outcomes that it could. Again, back at you, where are you actually using, tangible AI applications that in the past would have been done by humans or traditional computing that are really making a difference right now? And what do you see coming in the near future in that area?
I mean, I would start, I think what we've seen, one very significant area of opportunity has been genome sequencing.
Right.
Yeah. It's just been an area of understanding and comprehension, even for the brightest minds, that's very difficult for just a human being to comprehend the challenges of sequencing the human genome. And it took a very long time. And today, we're seeing companies amass enormous data sets of human genomes and are using, very powerful public cloud services from Amazon, Azure, Google, as well as from NetApp to do things with that data that they couldn't do. It wasn't that it was just AI, but it was a sort of a democratized AI. What these companies like Wuxi does, which is a Chinese Boston joint venture, is it's taken a database and it allows its customers to bring their own sequences into the database,
right,
and to build a larger, more global shared database to give every single person a sort of an exponential benefit that you contribute as part of the service, and by contributing, you're not only getting access to your own data, but you're getting access to a larger, more anonymized data set. So that's a real-world example, and helping people to sort of, as was said in the earlier panel, healthcare will certainly be, I think, probably the largest single industry transformed by data, right, and data in its derivative form.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
So I'll just quickly add in. I mean, I think AI is bound to be one of the most transformative areas for our business, specifically in 3 dimensions. One is personalization, the second is self-service, and the third is anomaly detection. So in terms of personalization, we've already invested heavily in our education business around really understanding the intent of long videos through AI, and then as clients come in and have behaviors of other clients, how do we serve up the right content that is most relevant to them? In the self-service domain, our clients have lots of questions, and sometimes they have them in the middle of the night, the day before taxes are due, and so rather than have to call into a contact center and be on a long hold, how can we utilize AI to understand the semantic intent of those questions that they ask, and they can do it self-service at any time on any device, using any mechanism that they want to do. And then the third one is really around a lot of the AML and fraud and things like that are usually finding a needle in the haystack. So how can we use AI and ML to basically, cybersecurity as well, to find those needles in the haystack, right?
anything you like? Is that
I spent some time in the health industry before, so I actually very much enjoyed the talk this morning about Blue Health Intelligence. And one of the things I learned that we were working on there was that we humans don't do a great job of taking care of our conditions, whether it's taking our medicines when we should or in the order we should. And so that's making a big difference there to be able to reduce costs by helping people better manage their health. So.
Okay, unfortunately, the clock's ticked to 0, so I'd like to thank Sherry, Vijay, and Anthony for your wisdom. I've certainly learned a lot. I really appreciate it, and hopefully everybody else has as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.